Welcome back to Highway Through Health. We're not a crisis line, we're not a therapy show, and we're not licensed healthcare providers. What we are is a place where lived experience is taken seriously because too many people have discovered the more clearly they speak, the worse they're treated. We share personal experience not to give medical advice, but so that when people encounter the kinds of situations we discuss, they're ready to recognize patterns and respond effectively. This show is about language, power, and what happens when systems stop listening and start translating people into problems. If you've ever felt misheard, mislabeled, or punished for staying coherent under pressure, you're in the right place.
Hey,
Hey, good afternoon, Dana. How are you doing?
all right. How are you?
Good. You know what? Let me turn a light on here. It might be a little
Okay.
dark. Forgot about that. Maybe that's a little better. Maybe it's not. I don't know. So how's it going today?
It's going real good. It's
Good.
been a good day, so
Great.
I definitely can't complain.
We definitely could do a lot of
How's it
complaining
been
though, couldn't
there?
we? So,
Couldn't we all, I guess?
yeah. Which brings us to a good
Yeah.
topic today, doesn't it? Which when radical defiance really is all that matters. We want to talk about compromise and pressure and defiance and how all that stuff works together. And maybe I'll start by just talking about through, when I was going through my disease and you're sitting there rotting and all your options have failed. There's no more treatments that are going to work. And it's, between you and your immune system, and your immune system's not slowing down. You start to be, I did anyway, I became defiant towards,
Yeah.
um, what would it be? I moved to a farm and started doing, rehab, doing field level
Yeah.
agriculture stuff, which isn't something you normally do when you're going through that kind of a challenge. But it really was something I needed, that kind of defiance. I had to push back. When from the time we're born into this society, it tends to be that we are told that the best way to develop, you know, good thinking and a good career and everything else is through pretty heavy duty compromise. You compromise where, for financial reasons primarily, but people compromise spiritual truths. They compromise on a lot of things just to fit in. But this was a point where compromise came to an end. This was just a one-on-one. It's me versus the disease. I'm going to ride this thing out until, I drop dead, not realizing that I could die before my body did. So it was really that defiance. I mean, obviously, my hands are a mess. My connective tissue is dissolved. I don't see very well. I walk funny. I'm not saying I'm in denial about the challenges I face, but I was defiant
Right.
in saying that is not going to stop me. And suddenly that becomes a tool. And I don't know that many people understand that kind of a tool, what it is. It does affect your relationship with other people because I know for me, there was zero compromise with deception. It was done. I was done. I knew I'm dying. This is it. I'm gonna make the best of my life from this moment until the day I quit breathing. And that's what I started doing. And that turned into a
Yeah.
tool. And so how do we describe that to people? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that is I think it's a good point that you make that people shouldn't have to wait. I feel like this is part and parcel too of us getting our narrative out there, because I don't know that people have heard enough narratives that are like ours to even have anything to compare it to
Right.
in their own lives, or to be able to say, yeah, I connect with that. I can see myself that people may have other kinds of challenges, but can see that, hey, we're tackling the things that we've had in a way that has supported our individuality, that we have strong boundaries, that we were able to stand up. to people that we knew were doing wrong. Um, I because I knew that for myself, I mean, I thought I'd spent years trying to avoid that relative who, like I say, he sold me. I would not have expected that. I only knew that he was toxic. He was not the kind of person I wanted in my life. But I had figured that, him being in another state and me being where I was, that our paths were not going to cross. I had no idea he was stalking me. I had no idea that he, like I say, sold me. I knew he did me dirty financially, um, but that was just not something, and truthfully, that's just not something you think somebody could do or get away with. But there are, these certain kinds of laws. And now, like I say, I know a lot about my own situation, that women are chattel property. And
Yep.
not only that, but Native Americans were just essentially allowed to be sold. We weren't even allowed to practice our religion until
Yep.
1978. And we were being sold. And I guess low key we're still being sold, into research, via the Catholic Church, who did plenty with the boarding schools, both in Canada with First Nations folks and here in the US. So now I can see how my life has come together. And like I say too, for me having the misuse of past life regression hypnotherapy, um, now I have a much better understanding of how life comes together. But these folks had no business doing that. You wouldn't think that people would be that perverted or that sick. Um, but they definitely were. And now we're finding out this is part of what's in the Epstein files too. I had actually just saw some confirmation about this morning, that he was looking into consciousness transfer, and this is why he had such close relations with certain universities. Um, and Maryland, Hopkins included, sends their billing up to Boston. So there's that connection, and with MIT, so there's that connection there with the computer experts and all
Mhm.
this. So I do feel like, we're talking about this in an excellent time. I think this is why we have spiritual awakening happening at this particular time, because we've had so much misuse of power, and so much manipulation, towards the kinds of things we're talking about, and towards Rockefeller, uh, you know, profit for health,
Right.
health care,
Right.
and this whole for-profit thing. It's all falling apart. Um, and for me, I felt like, as I was starting, because even though I was like in so much literally crippling pain, and things were getting worse and worse, and my heart problems were getting worse and worse, and my lupus was getting worse and worse. But I felt very determined, I suppose, to a point, because the more I started connecting with people with music again and being able to sort of get that community back for myself, which I kind of had lost for a while,
Hmm.
just given the things I was going through, and having been taking care of my adopted mother and all kinds of other stuff. Um, but then being able to regain that, and through the use of social media, like, just connecting with people all over the world, in addition to people that I hadn't talked to in years, that, was able to sort of reconnect and all this, that made a difference, because I started making jewelry again. I started baking again. I started to just do things that were not just survival based. And it was in putting that to use. But then I knew around that time too, that how just certain things were not right with my relationship, and
Hmm.
you know but that being what it is, I didn't, like I said, I didn't realize how very, very wrong until a little bit later on. But uh you know it was giving me an inner strength, and that inner strength and that sort of realization, of something greater, and trying to reach for that something greater, then became sort of my pledge of defiance. I was not somebody, because I realized compromise is one thing, but then when it becomes coercion, and when you are not allowed to have your autonomy, when you are not allowed to have your boundaries, that's just abuse.
Hmm.
And I wasn't going to take that on any front. I didn't like that already. I felt like I'd had to sacrifice my own life for, and it's one thing when you're taking care of somebody who's really quite ill. And it was like, okay, I get that I have to put my life on pause, and I was much more effective getting rid of the neurotoxins, even at that point.
Hmm.
Um, but I understood that. I said, that's one thing. I'm putting my life on pause for a reason here, and uh after my adopted mother passed and she was suffering so greatly, they were just pushing so much poison into her too. And they put her on a psych meds in addition to prednisone, in addition to, the Vioxx nearly killed her anyway.
Hmm.
She had to have the mesh implanted. So it's one thing when you're doing something, when it becomes that somebody's just wanting to compromise your entire life for no reason, other than their own financial gain, which it then became, you know, after a certain point. um, that's not okay.
Right.
That's just not okay. I started to see evidence of people wanting me to be sick, of people not caring. They already didn't care that I was in such severe pain. Um, and I knew that was wrong. And then they were refusing to treat my heart problems for years, and I couldn't understand that. Now I do. It wasn't just a matter of the profiteering, it was other.
Hmm.
Um, you and once you start to see that, that's going to give you a reason to fight back. And you everybody has a purpose in life, and to be able to push past it. And I think for both of us, having that the physical challenges, having the pain challenges, having things that we already had to work through on a daily basis, and then having the death and near death experiences and other things that we've had that would be extraordinary. It
Right.
gave us, I think this would be for you as well. But certainly for me, I already had a larger perspective on certain things, so it was that helped me to kind of put a uh damn it, ECT. This is when I get mad about the ECT, because any other time I used to be able to put things together in a
Oh, I
way that
know.
was like sensible, and I kind of lost that ability. Certain other things too, but life goes on. It just gave me a different perspective, and the wherewithal to be able to push through on that.
Right.
Um, and that's relevant. That's important. Um, and uh, and again too, the gentleman that disappeared recently, there's going to be a lot coming out with certain things that have been suppressed, certain things have been weaponized and plundered and profiteered. So we're going
Oh,
to see
I
a
think
lot of
so too. Yeah, there's
yeah.
there's a bunch coming out, and I think this issue of distortive compromise is going to be one of the things that really comes out of this spiritual awakening because we're going to start realizing we're not cooperating with deceptive systems anymore. We're not,
Yes.
there's absolutely no reason to do that. And, you know, I don't care to hear about Dale Carnegie or anybody else from that matter. And I'm not ragging on Dale Carnegie classes. I'm just saying that, if people take these things and they start thinking that, well, this is just a performative compromise where I'm going to just be throwing platitudes out to people and that's what's going to, move my career and my business and this and that forward. I think there's a lot of that that goes on. I think there's a lot of that that goes on in Washington where we have people that compromise on things that they know are
Yes.
not up and up, that we know are fraudulent, that we know are not helping people out. And we've become so tolerant of that kind of a mentality. I think it's kind of been beaten into us where we think of this notion of, you know, um, a democracy where we're all gonna, whoever votes the most wins. And it's like, wait a minute, there was this
Yeah.
idea of a republic where we don't, stick our fingers in each other's business and we're allowed to say no and we're allowed to reject something, a framework that's being shoved coercively down our throats. But today it seems like, no, if you really want to do that, you bet. I know it's that way in corporate. I know there was a
Yeah.
lot of distortive compromise in corporate
Oh
where it was a
yes.
lot of go along with the narrative, so what, it's not working. Don't bring up, these things, career limiting behavior if you tell too much of the truth. All those kinds of things were
Oh yeah.
very, very much part of the corporate ecosystem. And I think really that's what's damaged a lot of the US businesses is people have become way too compromising over things that really, really matter. We pitched out
Yes.
debate. We got rid of all that. There's nothing like going one on one against, a dying body to teach you what a lack of compromise feels like when you're doing that
Right.
and pushing back, and you know that you get up and you go do something today, or you might not see it tomorrow, then that it's a
Right.
completely different mentality. I wish I could describe it better. I don't think I've done enough time really contemplating this so I could get the words in place, but I think it's really important that for people to understand what that is. If we're compromising with reality, there's some function to it. But if we're compromising against reality, then there's future failure. So, in other words, compromising with reality, I know I got torn up hands. I know I'm not going to be a painter. I know I'm not going to be a sculptor or a potter, right? I put that out of the
Yeah.
way. But if I start compromising against reality, if I start saying, well, I can do that in spite of it, well, I'm going to have a lot of challenges, right? And I'm going to have probably at the end of the day is going to be future failure because I know that's just not what I am or what I'm doing. I'm trying to be something that I'm not. And what I really like about this spiritual aspect that I found is we're not compromising against what we're not. I really learned to find out what my strengths were. I was always terrible with dealing with plants. Now I'm not, I'm halfway decent. I'm no master gardener, but I learned to be halfway decent with them. I've got 30
Yeah.
tomato plants growing right now from
Ooh,
seeds. So things are
nice.
moving along. And I wouldn't have been able to do that 15 years ago. So,
Yeah.
if there's too much of this distortion that you're compromising with, and what it does is it stores friction. You get um confused. You don't have clarity. You're always caught between compromise and clarity, where you know what you have to do, but you don't do it. And I
Yeah.
guess this kind of defiance that we're talking about, you know what you have to do and you go do it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's about having a sharp definition and knowing because you do have to know yourself. And when you deal with lupus like we do, I like the person that had said once it was like a spoons analogy. You have so many spoons throughout a day, how much
Hmm.
energy you can expend. You already know your reality is you have a certain amount of limitations. So how's the best workaround with your limitation? And I was already like that anyway,
Yeah.
being neurodivergent and having the sensory overload, as well as then having the physical issues. So I already learned how to kind of plan, not just day to day, but week to week and month to
Hmm.
month. Because there's only a certain amount, and then having a very, very, very tight budget and very limited budget, it was always about doing that too. And then having been in retail management and having run businesses and stuff as well as a household, I had that sort of mentality as well, so this has sort of helped me across a number of things. But what your strengths and weaknesses are. So having that kind of sharp focus and to be able to say, okay, there are just certain things I don't compromise on. And people always knew this about me with my integrity. That was always
Hmm.
a deal breaker. You're going to ask me to compromise my honesty and integrity? It ain't happening. I don't give a damn who you are. I don't give two flips of a flapjack. It's just not going to happen. And
Right.
they knew this when I worked in retail, and that was a part of the thing that I think I may have mentioned too before. Because in spite of things and being dyslexic and everything else, I went and graduated top of my class for medical coding. And mind you, I'm on crutches, could barely
Nice.
walk. Yeah. Uh, and the thing of it is where I was being subcontracted at, turns out to be a very problematic corporate conglomerate. But I was doing chart auditing uh, with a woman, and they wanted us to sign off on upcoding. And I told her, I said, listen, I said, you can do that if you wish. It's not, but I can't. I said, I'm sorry. My
Right.
integrity's not for sale. I'm not signing on a dotted line for something I know is wrong.
Right.
And I don't care who's pressuring. I don't do that. So I lost that job. And, as it turns out, like I say, now I've discovered I really, really found a whole lot of, it wasn't
Hmm.
just that. And mind you, that was going on back in the mid, 2000s. So the amount of exponentially worse that it's gotten since then is mind-boggling. And you
Right.
figure the snake's going to eat its own tail as far as fraud goes. If they're getting away with one thing, they're getting away with something else. And as it
It's
is, it's like they didn't want us to be doing these audits so that we could find anything that seemed suspect. They wanted to do fraud better.
yeah.
You can't help it. That really is the truth of the matter, and I've seen it up close and personal. So being able to have a definition, and when you listen to your conscience and you are not willing to compromise what you know is right and wrong, when your values are actually rooted in actual values and not the value of a dollar,
Hmm.
it makes a huge difference. And here I think is where we see a lot of this compromise and compromise uh,
Yep.
in organizations, in all these systems, on with the Wall Street elites, with certain churches, certainly with people in politics,
Right.
and it's come and like an like a what do you call it? It happened a little bit at a time, but now it's like very, very out of control. And because it had been happening for decades, some other people didn't notice. Other things
That's
people did. And now that certain things are being in everybody's face, the fraud, certainly within the systems of, supposed help. Um, well, it was going to happen one way or another when you know that you're watching people actually take from folks who actually need it and line their own pockets with it. And all
right.
this pork, you know, it is what it is.
Yep.
Um, but I think for you and I, having a certain amount of integrity, not minding challenging ourselves, wanting to make sure that not only are we doing right for ourselves by ourselves, but to try and spread that out and bring this to other people. I mean that it definitely matters.
Yeah.
It
I
matters.
think, and really it's trying to help people understand what we're talking about before a crisis comes along. Because if you
Yeah.
do, you'll get through your crisis a lot easier with a lot less stress. If you don't
Yeah.
understand it, then you're going to be running around in this back to the circular room, open this door, same place, open that door, same place, open this door, same place. Because, as that pressure builds, and when I think back, I kind of feel like this defiance was building up as I knew I was getting sick and I knew everything, my career was going to end. I knew my life was likely going to end. I knew so much stuff was going to come to an end. There were things I wouldn't budge on. I could have made a lot more money by doing a lot more what I would call toxic compromise, but I refused to do it. It was just something that, instinctually I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. It was no. There was that line in the sand popped up and I didn't really realize how far it was going to take me or how much I needed what had popped up, but I did know that it wasn't socially popular. But at the same time, there's only, it felt like I can't go there. I can't join the circus. I can't go out and, be a performing elephant in return for a peanut. I'm not doing that anymore. It
Yeah.
just wasn't in me, wasn't
Right.
there. Didn't want it, didn't want any part of that. I started feeling, I would say, repulsed by that kind of attitude where people were just giving in and giving in, saying whatever you got to say to keep your boss happy, hoping he gives you a good plan and hoping you really rake in the cash on your
Yeah.
bonus. And I saw a lot of that happen. And I saw people just flat out making things up. And
Yeah.
I'm seeing that in society today, and I think that's really what's hurting us. So as this
Yes.
spiritual awakening starts to spread, I think it's going to be a lot more than what we used to think of in the past. It's far more functional, and
Yeah.
because early on I could work through some of the things, but as it came along and it got harder and harder and harder, then no, the defiance started coming up and just didn't want to hear it. I'm going to get through this day and I'm going to bed. we'll see if I have a
Yeah.
day tomorrow. And, because really you get to the point where for me, I didn't look, as far as I was concerned, today is my last day. I don't have a tomorrow. And so what am I doing today? Which is making the best that I can out of a situation that's not far from ideal, um, that seems hopeless, but in the end, it was just a learning experience. So,
Yeah.
um,
Right.
you know, so as I guess as you transition from this compromising mentality to an uncompromising mentality, we're not talking about rigidity. We're not talking about, dogma. We're back to that, fundamental rock of honesty with the discernment built in and the defiance that says, I'm not a victim. I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to cave into distortion, and I'm going to, give this day my best shot. That kind of what was the mentality I ended up with when I was in White Cloud before I knew what was about to happen.
Yeah.
So it was just get ready to push back, get ready to push back. Then you start doing the pushback, and then you realize you have to do this. And then you start, I don't know, it was letting that defiance out and seeing things change for the better. I started seeing plants grow. I started bringing things back. I'm getting rid of Japanese beetles. I'm learning about all kinds of things to make a farm kind of sort of work. And it was a lot of fun. I had a great time doing it. I kind of miss having a farm kind of an added because there's so much that you can do. Just go out every day and you can find something. You're busy. And there's a place to put that defiance. I feel bad for people stuck in a system today where they don't have a place to do that. They don't have an outlet for things
Right.
like that. You don't have a place to go be defiant and start building that counterintuitive rock inside yourself that you need to get through the stuff that you have to get through that's challenging you, that's trying to tear you down, that's ripping at every cell in your body sometimes is what it feels like. And that's so it's all in. And that's not something that we're trained to feel even from a young age because we are so much into this compromise, 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 compromise to make this person happy, compromise to make that person happy, compromise. Okay, it's a crappy system, but go along with it anyway. Don't push back, don't improve it, don't make things better. Just shut up and go along with it. And I think that's really eaten our country up. I think it's eaten a lot of people's
Yes.
spiritual practices up. And it's something that we have to learn how to steer our way out of if we want to get out of that circular room. Because every time you compromise, it becomes a door, right?
Yep.
And every door is an explanation. And at some point, you're doing the same old pattern. You're not pushing that defiance forward. You're not taking charge of what your life is. You're compromising in the way that you know that you probably shouldn't. And that just goes round, 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 round until you say stop it. And getting up the nerve to say stop it, especially when it's going to cost you everything. And I mean everything. I've lost everything twice. So you you know what's going to happen, but you also know that that's a process. And that process, when it ends, leaves you in a much better place, I feel.
Yeah. Oh yeah. To me, uh, as hard and as difficult as it was for me to lose everything, I lost everything. And I mean, I lost my life more than a few times. But when I was in the homeless shelter, and like I said, the betrayal factor for me was just harsh. It was just harsh.
Yeah.
But that made me realize too that that there was something much deeper going on, something that was metaphysical, something that was spiritual. When I was actually at the homeless shelter and wrote that 10-page letter to Social Security and basically dared them. I said, go ahead, take the check. Fuck it. Go for it. I
Right.
said, if this is how you really feel, knowing what I've been through, knowing what it is that I do have, knowing that people refuse to treat it. If y'all really feel the need to take this away from a woman who has done everything she can to try and be back to work, to do everything else, and was being abused like this, then I guess you're all going to have to do what you had to do. I
Yeah.
don't have anything else to save. I've already lost my cats. I've already lost everything. I'm
Hmm.
already, I was already at a homeless shelter. I'm like, I don't really know what all y'all want me to do because this
Right.
is not okay. None of this was ever okay. And I had already spoken at that point, had been making reports, or attempting to with the Maryland, state,
Hmm.
with the federal authorities and reporting these people who, like I say, I found out since they were doing fraud in numerous states. It wasn't just Maryland, they were doing this across a number of states. Some
Sure.
serious stuff. The SNAP fraud, all of this that's now coming out in the press, they were doing for years. And I've been trying to report it for a long time. So,
Hmm. And
it
why
is what
not?
it is.
It's easy
That's it.
money, you know?
Well, to them, because they just have zero morals. They have no morals
Right.
whatsoever. I was being treated as worse than a lab rat. The fact that they
Hmm.
rigged my cat's cages and just made up completely false narratives, misused past life regression hypnotherapy, so rape my soul. In addition to doing everything else that they could do
Right.
just for their own gain. And like I say, now I understand just how deep the rabbit hole went. uh okay, well, now it's giving me the opportunity to tell people. And I already knew that I didn't want to be around those toxic people and around those toxic drugs and all of that crap. I didn't want to be around any of it. I'd
Right.
had all those seizures and I died from my heart problems and had the ECT, which they knew for a fact I didn't want. And I'm glad that everything's on my phone because it's all right there in black and white.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Me talking to somebody, like I say, who's a known fraud and living with a well-known domestic abuser as well as a fraud who was working with them as a researcher, I'm sickened, but it is what it is. Now I'm in better physical and mental health than I've ever been in my entire life.
Right.
And they're being held to account. Okay, well then I'm glad. Thank you, God, for allowing me to play that part. But I think with the rise of AI too, we're finding that people are not fine. This is just untenable. The entire fraudulent system is untenable. The
Right.
entirety of the corporate corruption, the entirety of the Wall Street elites, the entirety of the insider trading, all of this, it's just going to collapse. And okay, you know what? Then I'm here for it because it shouldn't have been going on for as long as it's been anyway, because it has literally
Exactly.
been decades. Some of these things were things that were being used against Native Americans for years as they were finding oil and things. I would, if you're unfamiliar with Killers of the Flower Moon, whether the book or the Scorsese film, I definitely recommend that people look into that because all of this stuff declaring anybody who is indigenous as incompetent and taking over their money or attempting to from payment for the oil and payment for
Oh yeah.
this is the same thing. This is the same thing, and we're just seeing it on a larger, grander scale. And it's this stuff is just it is going to collapse. I do feel that people who are familiar enough that are having spiritual awakenings, again, I think this is where us having this is really going to be something that helps other people to help define their experiences, helps give them something to see as something to hold up and compare it to, because we're certainly not the only ones who have had these awakenings. We may be
Right.
some of the few that have had our own particular stories, yes. But I feel like this is very necessary because I want people to be able to see this. In fact, in one of the near death experiencer groups, I was talking to somebody, or they made a comment about how do I follow this up, and I said, well, definitely don't go to a traditional therapist. You don't want to do that.
No, you don't.
And here again, I feel like what we're doing is a vital and necessary thing. Because I do want for people to be able to follow this up in a way that is sensible, that does give community, that does give rises to voices like ours.
Hmm.
Not everybody is aware, okay, I've had a healing. Now what, now how do I apply that in a larger sense? How do I now further discover my purpose in a larger sense? And we shouldn't have had to lose everything, but since we did,
Yeah.
it kind of does echo what the apostles went through in Acts. So I think in many ways we're seeing history repeat, and the Bible is a record of history as well as a
Yep.
record of spirituality. And I think if maybe people are going to go back and read that as it is and kind of line that up with different events in world history, I feel like that's necessary. And what is their personal relationship with God?
Right.
And no matter what spiritual tradition you come out of, the Bible is still a historical document. Jesus existed definitely, so there's historical evidence
Yep.
for this. So to be able to take Jesus's example and it's like, okay, now how do I follow this in a very practical manner? And then you do have things that are codes in the Bible. The numbers mean something, and to be able to look at that more in depth, that allows people to kind of bring together that science, that spirituality, the things we see in the world around us as evidence of a greater creation, as evidence of a source creator.
Right.
And be able to bring that together again, no matter what sort of tradition you may be in, that it still fits. It's not a one versus another moment. It's a, oh, this is how this all fits together like a puzzle piece.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I think what we've been trying to tell people is that it's a lot bigger than what you've ever
Right.
thought. Because once you factor in this notion that you are able to have these very powerful, very real, these are not psychosis, this is not schizophrenia, this is not a joke, this isn't, people doing the Kenneth Copeland thing. This is a I mean, how do I know that Christ was real? Well, when I walked up and went through my death, what happened was I was walking across a field and I could feel something was going to happen once I got to where I was going. I didn't really know what that was going to be. But when I went across and I got hit by that light beam, the first thing that popped up was a cross. And I'm sitting there going, I'm trying to say that's Jesus's symbol, but the word Jesus would not come out of my mouth. It's like, you don't know him. You can't even speak his name. Why? Because I had had the American style Christianity drilled into me that normalized hypocrisy, the crap that we're seeing today, this notion that you have to go, assault and murder people to make progress when this was the
Right.
opposite. This was
Yes.
no, this was the fight was between people who use deception and people who never use deception. That was very clear, very distinct. These are the people that rejected it. These are the people that still using it. When there is a time, if there is a time, we have one of these big, end times wars, then it's going to be against those two people, not against both sides that are just lying their butts off. And both people are, not one side is really any better than another. So stop trying to claim it, you know. Uh,
Right.
I
Right.
so for me, it walked me through the whole thing. This is what you thought, this is what it was, this is why you thought that way. I mean, these are extremely powerful, very real experiences that people can have, and I think we'd have a lot more of them if we can get the stigma, as we talked about last week, out of the conversations. And really, when you're in that
Right.
circular room, not knowing how to use that defiance to help push you out, the longer you stay inside, the harder it is to exit. It's that neuroplastic effect that we talked about too,
Right.
right? You start exercising that prefrontal cortex as you're using deception as a part of your life. Then what happens? You program yourself to do that. You don't program yourself to break out. You program yourself to go along with it. And that makes sure that you stay in it. So, I think I wish there was a real quick shortcut, but I think until we get to the point where we can start teaching our kids how this works, and learn how to integrate it into that, we're going to have a hard time The longer for me, it happened to me when I was what, 50 years old, roughly 52, 51, some 51, I think I was when that happened. So, I had a lot of unlearning to do. And it
Yeah.
was that defiance in the face of all that attack that really brought that forward. I mean, early on, you can cooperate, you can keep going, try and make your job work, try and make this work, try and make that work, knowing that in the long run it's not going to work. But you feel it. I felt that, and I didn't want to be part of something like that. I couldn't do it. I couldn't go along with it, which is really the strange point. So there really was kind of a breaking point where you just say, no, I'm,
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing. I can't explain it. I can't help you understand it. To the people that don't know what we're going through, we do our best to try and help people understand it. Working through the stigma, working through the other things that we have to work through to discuss these kinds of topics with people. But what do you say? It gets to the point where you can't afford to bend what you know what's true anymore. You can't.
Yeah.
It
I
quits.
Yeah, I like to tell people, I mean, because for me, I felt like I was only seeing one color of the rainbow, to some extent, and then I could see the whole thing. I was only
Mhm.
seeing a small piece of the puzzle, and I wasn't seeing the larger sense. I like the question, like when you think Pete Holmes is a good person, I think, to listen to. Even just his stand-up comedy is funny, but he's talked about more in-depth things. And he had actually started out being like a Christian counselor before he got into doing stand-up and all. And he had written this book called Comedy, Sex, God. And it really is about how he through his first marriage, his wife ended up cheating on him. He got divorced, and it kind of really upended his life. And he put that into stand-up comedy, which he kind of knew he wanted to do that anyway. But he had a great show called Crashing that was about his journey doing this. And the way he talks about it, because he met Baba Ram Dass and really got into doing meditation, so it kind of helped him be really connecting like the Christian aspect of things with the personal experience,
Hmm.
and how he got through it. And I think that because it really, certainly when I was going through a lot of the things that I was going through, he was one of the people that kind of kept me um really grounded in something. I'm like, oh, he gets it. But part of his thing was like, you have to ask yourself, like, when you know you have to pee, well, who's telling you have to pee? It's like you have another like awareness of your own
Right.
self. So be aware of that awareness, be aware of that higher mind.
Hmm.
um and really being able to figure out that higher mind, and like I've read Itzhak Bentov's books, that's where we all interconnect. And that's where that energy is. That's where that interconnected energy is. So I think if people would start realizing more that we are not a body with a soul, we're a soul having an experience in a body. We are an eternal energy
Hmm.
that temporarily inhabits this meat suit. So when we sleep, you go to that higher energy.
Right.
That's why they call sleep the little death, because that is you're returning your energy towards something greater. We're all frequency and vibration. I think the more that people have a deeper awareness of that, um because it kind of like had been hitting me piece by piece. And I'm guessing too, this is where they say, when you die you start to understand everything. It was like, well, I was dying so damn much when I was having those seizures. It was just mind blowing. It really was.
Yeah.
Um, and then a couple times after that too. So the and that one time where like I said, I've been in the hospital and my cheeks were nearly broken, my eyes black, and all this, and they didn't even want to get officers in there. Now I know why, because they were doing this research, and
Hmm.
now I understand that. And I died, and they knew that, and they didn't care, because they wanted to research it. It wasn't about helping me at all.
Right.
And wanted to say I was on drugs. I wasn't on drugs. I tried to kill myself because nobody was helping me leave an abuser. I mean, Jesus, I
Hmm.
don't know what more they wanted me to do. Um, but that's that doctor that went to McGill and all of this. This is all falls into some MK Ultra stuff and all, but it is what it is. Again, I can't. But I was given this like really weird iPad. Um, and just some strange things happen. I'm like it would take me a little while to try and put it into more, but I realize we're all frequency and vibration. I
Right.
saw something when I was deceased at that time that kind of interconnects with that. Yeah. It
It's
would be it would be muchness, but it did lead me to understand that certain things like vibration, frequency, energy go on. What you seek is seeking you. There is just more to the story uh than you're normally given privilege of at a particular time. So let's just
hmm
say, you have a soul family, you're always connected. That eternal energy knows you regardless. And yeah, I my last lifetime I went out because of the same person in the same way. And the person who's now, well, she was my younger sister last lifetime, but let's just say nobody wanted to see me go out the same way this time around. So
right.
you and that is kind of falls into what karma is and what an eternal lesson is, that each thing is kind of planned. You have different levels that you need to, what ascension is rising above those challenges. How do we rise above those challenges? And then how are we able to express that to other people so that we can help other people understand in ways that don't, where they're not going to end up deceased or end up in a way through their own hand or through some bad decisions, in so much as we can help it.
Right.
But that, and that can be part of our life plan too. And I definitely really felt that with certain things. So,
You know,
it gives me a greater sense of gratitude to understand that, to have that deeper purpose and all, because you know it and particularly when people have had difficult lives, it's like, yeah, just keep making the right decisions anyway, because
mhm.
God's going to come through for you. You're going to
Yeah.
find this out. And I think that having had those experiences, I was getting little pieces of that puzzle as I was fighting back. It was giving me the strength to fight back, because I kept thinking, why am I even still here? This is not. But the more things were happening and the more I was realizing that, they were researching, and the more I was realizing how it fit in with my own life plan. And that
Hmm.
they kept trying to be one step ahead, but it was always God always has a greater plan. So with that, I was like more than one step ahead, and so were the other people who knew. The people in my soul family kept me going. So
Maybe this defiance is just something that I guess when you look at it backwards, what we're doing is taking out what we know that's not true and we don't let it back in.
yeah,
Because then if you want to look at that complete inverse way, and this is one of those topics where we have to talk backwards, which makes people think that,
yes,
we're unhinged sometimes, but we're really not. We're trying to describe an incredibly counterintuitive experience that molds and shapes a person in ways that can be replicated without going through all that disaster and pain and suffering that we've gone through. But man, we cannot underestimate the utility of absolute honesty can't be understated. We just really, that's vital. And then the discernment that comes in on top of it. We're not sitting around repeating a bunch of silly stuff just to fit in to a denomination or a crowd or a synagogue or whatever you want to
Exactly.
bring up, or a gathering of spiritual people, which churches kind of try to be. But this is a lot different. It's a we going to, for me, once it was all over, I realized that after the experience first one happened, I had to glue myself back together. That's what got me kidnapped, unfortunately, because I wasn't around people that were being honest with me. A lot was going on
Yeah.
behind my back that I wasn't aware of. And that took a good situation and turned it into a bad situation really, really fast. But, when I realized what that was, now it's okay. We got to remove all this. So this is definitely X5. This is you lie, you die. This is get rid of deception. And what took its place? Super consciousness. I mean, getting in
Yes.
contact with the divine intelligence.
Yeah.
I can't, again, I cannot describe the power of that experience. This is something that people have to experience for themselves to understand what it is. It's not something you read about. It's not like going to Disney World. It
Right.
kicked the
Sure.
crap out of me. It left me bleeding. I was, left me healed, left a whole lot of stuff. It will rip you to shreds. And also for me, because this is such a stigmatized topic, it also left me in a position where I had absolutely nothing in common with virtually everybody that I had known my entire life. So now what do you do? Now, how do you glue those two things back together as you have a complete system that's going out and trying to steal away from you everything that God just handed you to help you get through the experiences that you're going through, and then to realize that there's an industry out there that's really just full of predators who want to take it from you. And they're relentless. I feel, I noticed when I
Yeah.
really got
Yes.
sick, you get, you're viewed as disposable pretty fast in a society
Hmm.
that values, a lot of output. So now you're just, a drain, you're this, you're you're a personification of all the prejudices that everybody else has about, illness, chronic illness, how you deal with it, suffering, pain, all that noise. You get a lot of people projected on you, and that defiance of coming back and saying, "No, I know what happened. I'm not budging on what happened. I'm going to keep talking about
Hmm.
what happened in the way that it really happened, not the way that makes the psych industry a ton of money or helps them corrupt our courtrooms like they've done so efficiently over the past 20 years." But you know, and I guess if there's a difference, the honesty part was that enabled the discernment, but the discernment stops the discernment probably along with the defiance is what really stops from readopting some of the things that you have to get rid of. And following a process, I don't know about you, but I would describe it as relatively easy when you can describe it as a process. But it would be a process that's a whole lot easier if we didn't have to face the kind of institutionalized discrimination and the threats that we have to face from the psych industry. That is not gone. I feel like that has been put in our way deliberately. So,
Yeah. Oh, definitely. But I've seen it falling apart. Because I know, like I say, that one doctor, uh, that was in large part responsible for, spirit, being the head of all this abuse. She has at least three other aliases, at least. So this is beyond problematic, to say the least. And what I found out, she has already been popped for misuse of past life regression hypnotherapy. From what I gather, it's already been in a couple states. So some of this stuff that I've been seeing, once I start seeing more and more confirmation of what I already knew, what I'd been through. And I thought, okay, well, thank you, God, for giving me the wherewithal to have the autism. Uh, to be able to either remember or be a master note taker. Now it's like, well, all my notebooks are gone. That's a damn shame, but at least I had been complaining, and I'm a champion complainer. If somebody's doing the wrong thing, I'll complain to their boss, and I'll
Mm.
complain to their boss's boss. I ended up with 6 months of free cable because I got PO'd that somewhere along the line somebody had erased my episodes of Conan and Colbert. Well, you don't fool with my late lates. I will get
Uh-oh.
mad. And somebody did that. And I'm like, nah, we ain't playing this game here, honey. No.
No.
So I
Nope.
wrote a letter to the head of Comcast and complained, and I ended up with 6 months of free. Anyway, it's a long story, but the thing is, it's like, and I knew when I was having the seizures, like I figured this was like some kind of corporate law because they were doing tenant harassment.
Hmm.
And so I ended up writing to my local congressman, and I said, this place has black mold. It's a lot of other, it was a lot of other shady stuff going on. And I knew
Right.
that. I just didn't realize just how bad things were. I didn't realize at the time, like I said, I'd been sold and sold into the research. So they were kind of using me as a canary in the coal mine. And they were either making laws or finding out where like the weaknesses were to do other things to rip people off based on my experiences. And I'm like, yeah, you know
Right.
what? Fuck off, state of Maryland. I really don't appreciate this. But
Right.
it happened. Um, it happened, and I knew it wasn't any coincidence that they made coercion against the law about a month after I left the state of Maryland. So I'm like, now it's codified into law. I feel like that line of Homer Simpson. Well, see, because of me, they made a sign. Well, now see, because of me, they made a law,
Yeah.
and that's a plus. You know what? That's a good thing. Now I'm able to kind of go and backtrack and be able to say, now I can use that against them. So it's, God has a way of working things out. I don't have to like the things I've been through, but that's something I can work out, and I do every day. And
Yep.
then that also allows me to kind of what we're doing here is to kind of help people realize their own power, be proactive in their own health. I can now explain that yes, healing does happen. Past life regression therapy does work when it's ethically used, applied, and followed up. It absolutely works. So if I can help build that into a framework for other people, whether it's nerve damage, whether it's lupus, spinal issues, heart problems, any kind of,
Hmm.
and obviously I still have heart problems from what happened last week, but people were so kind to me that it was refreshing to see that. And I thought,
That's
well,
nice.
yeah, it really was. It was very nice to see. So to be able to experience that was a pleasure. I think it's gauche to pass out in a Walmart, but or very nearly so. But it is
Right.
what it is. But when you can see the kindness of strangers sort of exemplified like that, that's always just a real pleasure. Um,
That is a helpful thing because you don't see
it,
that
it
too much.
is.
And people don't
Um,
realize how many people are out there geared up
yeah,
to exploit people like you and I. I mean, I feel I'm guarded when I go into any kind of a, ever since the kidnapping, I'm not open when I go in to see doctors. I'm not. Why should I
no, I
be?
don't. I don't go at all. I don't
And
go at all.
once you learn what's really at play, then until you get somebody who will explicitly tell you that, we can have dialogue without psych labels, then there's no point in even attempting to have
Right.
that dialogue. Because as you get into all this counterintuitive stuff, you start talking in ways that they're not used to. Well, they're not understanding the level of defiance that we've had to use in our lives to push that back. And they don't understand how much that we have broken that cooperative, cancerous system up and gotten it out of our lives. And we don't want it back in because we know that's what tears our health up. That's what we know kills us. That's what
Yeah,
we know,
that's it.
ends everything. And so, it's difficult because you're caught in between that. Do they just throw you into a nursing home or what? I know when I got sick, all the predators showed up. There were all of them. What don't you have? What aren't you going to need? What can I take from you now?
Yes.
That's very common. It's more common than people would want. You have to go through it to experience it. But
Yeah.
I think I
Yeah.
understand why a lot of really, really sick people don't tell other people how really, really sick they are, because they start realizing that if I do that, then I'm going to be viewed as disposable that much faster. And
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
not so much that they're protecting them, but they just they're protecting themselves. That's self-preservation,
Yeah.
because once you get thrown into that disposable mode, things can get really, really ugly really, really fast. And
Very.
so I guess
Very.
to close it all off, I guess, our question to people listening would be, do you want to wait until you get into this massive
Right.
crisis like we found ourselves in, before you learn what's going to happen to you as you go through this, or do you want to start learning a little bit earlier? We strongly encourage people to learn a little bit earlier. Pick a small
Yeah.
project. You don't have to move it all the way through your life at one time. Just pick a little thing to, I applied it on a 3.5 acre thing and,
Yeah.
sand pit in front of my house that was attached to another 80 acres. And I would do stuff in the woods too, bringing in trees, doing this, doing that, watching plants grow. Maybe that's a little too big, but you can do that whole thing in a smaller sense with a
Yeah.
hobby, or getting
Oh,
out and
yeah.
talking to other people, just kind of putting yourself out there and saying, I'm going to lose the fear. I'm going to pick up my defiance. I'm going to get over these issues I have and go out and face the day and see what happens. And I think
Yeah.
when more people realize what you're doing, then they try to help you a little bit more. Until they realize what you're doing, and especially with the medical industry, the way it's set up right now, they're just going to try and figure a way to profit off of you and toss you into the scrap heap at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the sad thing.
Yeah, it is. And yeah, people should be prepared, be proactive about your health, definitely. Uh and it is small step. Like I said, I do chakra clearing every day. I really work on, when I feel like deep trauma, I work on it. I sit with it.
Mhm.
I'm comfortable with it. I don't, you know, deny it. I don't distract from it. I feel it and I write
Yep.
it down. I write. I'm glad I'm a writer. I'm glad I enjoy that.
Yep.
Um, I was worried that the seizures in ECT, it kind of threw me off track a little bit. But I think I could get back into maybe writing reviews. I used to work for a magazine. I miss,
Oh
writing
yeah.
reviews. I miss doing that, but I think I could get back into it. And maybe I will, So and that's the kind of thing too that I was doing when I was sick, and it was something I discovered I had like a real kind of
Right.
affinity for it and enjoyed. Um, you know, so I have been, defiant, not letting things be taken from me. Enough was taken from me. They're not going to take myself from me. That's just not
Nope.
going to happen. And I would say to anybody, yeah, do things that are positive, do things that add something into the positive, just of the world in general, I mean, your life, and then by extension, it'll help other people.
Yep.
Be the example of be the example, be the change you wish to see in the world. It was Dalai Lama that said that, or I think it was.
Hmm.
But it's the truth, if you got a grocery store that you can walk to, I like doing that now. I have one that I can walk to, and I'm grateful I can walk, and
Nice.
so I'm grateful
Yeah.
I can do that, and go and get vegetables and then bring them back and fix for everybody, and fix nice vegetables and kale chips and things like that. And
Yep.
and it's appreciated, so that means a lot to me. And there's just, I'm going to paint some rocks. We've got a park not terribly far from here, and I'm going to leave some
Yep.
painted rocks around the park, like little
Yep.
messages like thank God and different things like that, just so people could find them, or hey, how you doing?
Yep.
Just kind of maybe make somebody's day. You never know. Um, yeah,
Absolutely.
just add to the positive in life, there's a lot of people who could really use a smile, you know. So
Yeah,
you know, be out there, give that smile to somebody that doesn't have it. Otherwise, it sometimes means more than the world to somebody. It really does.
absolutely. Well, listen, Dana, thank you very much. It's been a good conversation again. Appreciate
Well,
it. And it's been another hour we've gone through.
it goes
So,
quick, I'm telling you.
they do go quick, don't they?
They
It's like you snap
do.
our fingers and they're gone. All right, well, I
Yeah,
will get this put together and get it out there and do the
problem
things I
solved.
normally do with it. And I'll be talking to you again probably before we get together again. So, see you soon.
Absolutely.
All right,
All righty, hon. Have a
take
good one.
care. You
See ya.
too. Bye bye.
Bye.
We'll see you next
Bye.
week. Bye.